Welcome to TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we're going to explore the function of setting up and making use of the barcode labels part of your AIM program. This is a module that's been around pretty much since the days of DOS, and it allows you to label your inventory with an available barcode for easy scanning at point of sale. That can be either in replacement of or in addition to any barcodes that the manufacturer includes on the product. And it also gives you the ability to put additional details on the labels, such as descriptions and pricings and cost codes and all sorts of things that can benefit your customers as they're browsing your store, as well as your staff. We're going to take a look at how this all gets set up, how it works, and how you can use it. As always, here in GoToWebinar, if you have any questions, definitely plug them into the questions box, and I will do my best to monitor that as we go along. But as always, we will go ahead and switch over to my AIM screen here, my good old TriTech University copy. And we'll just go ahead and turn off my webcam so that we can focus and make this screen as large as possible, because I know sometimes these details are a little small, and I do my best to try and maximize them whenever I can. So the way that barcode labels work is there is a maintenance function within the program, specifically within the inventory module, that allows you to set up your barcode labels. So if we go into maintenance and into inventory, we will go to where it says set up barcode labels right here. Same concept if you use the drop-down menus, maintenance, inventory, and set up barcode labels, same program. Now, within these barcode label settings are two key factors: styles and defaults. When we talk about the style of a label, we're basically talking about the layout of the label itself. So how big the surface area is of the label in relation to the size of the media, I guess you could say, that it is coming on. So in most cases, label roles are going to have a pretty close relationship, if not an exact relationship, between what we call the page width and the label width, as well as the page and label heights. Let me go ahead and grab my highlighter just so we can kind of label out here or indicate what I'm talking about. So page width and height are the size of the media, such as the roll itself or the piece of paper that the labels are on, and the label width and height are the labels themselves. So make sure that makes sense and that you're kind of following along with that. So now, in addition to that, there are some other settings, and we're going to get into all of this in just a moment. Now, what I have done here is I have loaded some defaults, and you can do this yourself if you'd like. There are a number of labels that we here at TriTech sell that are compatible with the latest Zebra barcode label printers. And you don't necessarily need to use Zebra label printers. Some of you may be still using the old cognitive blasters that we sold way back in the day, and others still might be using other brands of label printers like Brothers. You may be even setting your printer up just as your regular 8.5 by 11 page printer and loading Avery style labels in there. So we're going to talk about basically how you can set all those up, and this is all in relation to the style. So when you see these numbers here, these are in inches. So for example, this particular style of label that we sell, this label ending in 2312, these labels are just under 2.5 inches in width. So that's across the label. And then they are just over an inch in height. And that is up top to bottom of the label. And you can see that the page width and height are exactly the same, indicating that there's basically no margin or anything like that around the labels themselves. Now, we do have a little bit of a margin here. When we talk about margins, we're talking about essentially the the tiny minute amount of space around the label in relation to the media. So in this case, we have 1/10 of an inch from the top and 5/100ths of an inch on the left, basically just to give it a little bit of extra wiggle room when we're starting that printout. Because even though these Zebra printers are very accurate, sometimes they may get off by just a smidge, and so it's helpful to have some of that margin for error in there. Now, if you are setting up a style of label that has two labels side by side, such as this label here, this label ending in 1213, you can see the page width and height are 2 1/4 by 1 1/4. The label height is the same, but the label width is exactly 1/2 of the page width. And that's because there are two columns, and basically the labels themselves are right next to each other. So there's effectively two labels next to each other for every one that advances on the roll. If you intend to set up an Avery style sheet of labels here for the purposes of your style, you would essentially make this be 8.5 by 11, and then you would put in the exact sizing of the labels. You would then measure out and input any margins around the edges of the paper, followed by putting in how many columns are across, usually 3 or 4 or something like that. You would also want to make sure you put in the column spacing. So in other words, how much space is in between each column, and also how much space is in between each row. As far as duplex, I haven't seen hardly any label printers that print in duplex, but if there is a printer that you're using that can print front and back, you would just need to make sure that you specify whether that page gets flipped over either horizontal or vertical. Lastly, orientation. Most label printers will print in a portrait style orientation. A lot of the brother style printers print in a landscape orientation. So they're very narrow, and then they kind of print left to right, so to speak, as they're printing out, being ejected from the printer itself. Now, if you do set up an Avery style printer or a sheet of labels, oftentimes there are multitudes of labels on them, which of course is the whole idea, 30, 40, sometimes more labels, but you might not be printing 30 or 40 labels at a time. So if you are setting something like that up, you may want to go ahead and check mark this option to ask for skipped labels when printing. That way, when you feed a sheet of Avery labels or any brand name, I'm just picking on Avery because everyone kind of knows what we're talking about. But when you feed a sheet of labels through your printer and it doesn't print all of them, by having this check marked the next time or any time you print labels to that style of label, it will ask how many labels it needs to skip. And that way, let's say you printed 16 labels on a 30 sheet of labels available, and you'd feed that through the next time, it'll ask how many it needs to skip. You would say 16, and then it would know to skip to the 17th available label and start printing from there. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, what you do with this setup of the style is you associate styles with your specific printer where you would have those labels printed. I'm going to leave this up on screen, and I'm going to use the drop-down menus to go to Maintenance, General, and Workstations. In the individual workstations of your computers, you will be able to go to the number 4 Miscellaneous tab, and on that Miscellaneous tab, you're going to go to where it says Miscellaneous 2. On Miscellaneous 2, you'll be able to choose up to 3 linked barcode printers. In this case, you can see that I've got several printer options here, and basically you would just choose whichever printer driver is associated with the label printer that you want to use. If we're talking about a dedicated label printer, again, like a Zebra or a Cognitive or a Brother, you would select that. If we're talking about a regular inkjet or LaserJet, you would select that. Then you would make sure that you select the label style that you are working with. So I'm kind of talking about the 2312s. So I would make that selection as appropriate, just like this. I'm going to use that as my default, by the way. I'm also going to, just for kicks here, I'm going to go ahead and make a selection here. I'm just going to say this is to the screen. It doesn't have to be that way, but normally you don't really have to even set up a screen option like this. I'm just going to use this because I actually don't have a label printer on my computer. I'm just going to go ahead and set that up here. That's the whole idea behind the style. Now let's talk about the defaults. The defaults are going to be what actually prints on that available space. So if we take a look at the kind of the standard defaults that I've got for this first label, this 2312 label, this is divided up into kind of a top half and a bottom half, and I'm going to try and define these for you. Let me go ahead and once again grab my pen this time. So starting up here, this section here, you can have multiple layouts, if you will, or multiple defaults for different types of inventory that you want to print or different types of labels, but they'll all be linked, whether you have 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., but they'll all be linked to their respective label style. So basically, this is where you can see all of the labels that you've set up, the different layouts and whatnot. To the right of that, this is where, let me grab the highlighter in this case, this is where you can name the layout description as well as tell it the details of the barcode. So if you're going to be printing a barcode, you're going to want to choose a barcode type. Let me switch to my arrow here, key here, so I can actually click on this. In most cases, you'll choose either code 128 or code 39. If you have no idea what this means, just know that 128 or 39 are very popular code styles that most barcode readers, especially the ones that we sell, can read and decipher. There are a bunch of other code types, but for the most part, you can get by with using either or of those particular two. Now, as far as the rest of that barcode setup, when it comes to the font, you can have the actual letters and numbers be printed on the barcode, just like you would see on any other type of printout. You can make a selection of a given font if you'd like, and then you can specify the font size. Now, basically, if this font size is 0, I believe, if I remember correctly, it will not print the kind of the human readable numbers, and then you can make that be as big as you want or as small as you want. The next couple of fields are going to get into a very key element that kind of goes throughout this whole barcode setup process, and this is all about positioning. Left positioning and top positioning. These are numbers that are once again in inches, and this essentially determines where on that field of the label this particular detail will start printing. In this case, the barcode itself. If we look at these numbers, the left positioning of the barcode is 5/100ths of an inch from the left. So in other words, it's just barely indented from the left-hand edge of the label. And the top positioning is 0.5, 5/10ths of an inch, or in other words, half an inch. And if we recall, let me go ahead and get rid of this ugly drawing and stuff. If we recall, these labels are 2.5 inches wide, just to keep it rounded, and a little over an inch in height. So in other words, when we set up the barcode here as 0.5 from the top, it's effectively going to start about halfway down of this label. And it has effectively just under 2.4 inches of room across the label to print as big of a barcode as it needs. Now the bar width, if you'd like to space out the white space in between the individual bars, you can set that here. If you leave it blank, it'll just auto size accordingly. Kind of the same detail with the bar height. If you'd like the height of the barcode to be taller or smaller, you can set that here. And if you leave it at 0, it will auto size. You can also specify whether that should go left to right, right to left, top to bottom, or bottom to top. And what is the distance between, or actually, I guess I should specify, this is the width of the bars themselves. This is actually the amount of space between the bars. So again, this can actually make the bar be, the whole entire barcode be much larger by making them more spaced apart. In most cases, you can leave all these at 0, and all modern barcode scanners that I've seen have no problem reading that. If you have an older barcode scanner, you may need to make these bigger or smaller, dependingly on that. That's the top half. Now let's go ahead and take a closer look at the bottom half. This is basically all the rest of the detail that will print on the remaining available space of the barcode, or of the label. So the left-hand side over here, this is basically what you already have set up. These are the basic details that are already there. And if we take a look at this drop down here, this is basically everything that can be pulled from an inventory record that can then be printed on the label. And you've got all kinds of detail here, starting with attribute details coming from your subcategories, going down through consignment details. If you are a consignment heavy store or even a consignment exclusive store, you can pull in cost codes, you can pull in customer attributes, you can pull in date information, description information, acquisition and disposition information. So all kinds of details can be printed on here. Some of them are obviously very specific to certain industries. Most of these are just across the board, kind of available to most any store when it comes to your inventory setup. A basic default label will have the description printing essentially at the very top of the label, kind of across the way, followed by the text of retail price, which is followed directly across of text of our price, and then below those are the retail and our price fields respectively. Now I'm going to go back through that. Again, you can see that each one of these detail lines has a font and font size. You can also play around with things like bold and italics and underlines and things like that. They all have a positioning. So again, just how much space starting from the left and how much space coming down from the top. How much room are you going to give it, and then basically the number of characters across. And then if you'd like to give it any kind of angle on the printout as well. And then they all have this little checkbox option for print if our price is greater than retail. You'll notice that the majority of these have that check marked, except for the text of retail price and the retail price itself. When we talk about the text of retail price, there's a special option you can pick to add called type your own text. And if you select that, you can just fill in whatever you want it to have say on the label. So in this case, it's saying retail price and our price. And if we can take a look here, we can see that this text of retail price is 1/4 inch from the left and 18/100 from the top. If we look at the text of our price, it's the same top positioning, but it's further over. It's indented by an additional inch. So basically it's on the same line, but the text of our price is further over to the right. And then same concept for the prices themselves. You can see that the actual retail price is being pulled in exactly the same left positioning, but a little bit further down. Same concept with the our price. It's exactly the same left positioning as the text of our price, and it's the same top positioning as the retail price. What does this all mean when this gets printed out? Oh, actually, let me finish up what I mean by this little checkbox here. So print if our price is greater than retail. One of the key elements of AIM is to display when your our price, which is your default selling price, is less than the suggested retail price of the manufacturer. And in most cases, this is going to be probably the case because you're trying to compete with your local brick and mortar competition, with the internet, and most times the manufacturer's list price is it's a nice price, it's a target price, but it's often much higher than when you can actually sell it for. The firearms industry right now is probably the exclusion to that rule just because demand is so high. But that's a story for a different time. Now, when we talk about print if our price is greater than retail, notice these are not check marked, and that's because you wouldn't want to actually display the retail price if it's less than what you're selling it for. So basically what this would do is if the our price is greater than retail, it won't print the text of retail price or the retail price itself. And I'll try and give an example of that here. When you set all of this up, you can test this out by clicking the test button, and then this will pop up a little window somewhere. It's probably hidden on my screen. Where did it go? There it is. It's hidden behind my GoToWebinar. There we go. Okay. So when you click that test button, it'll pop up this little test barcode label. You'll basically just put in whether it's inventory or some other type of thing, and then you'll put in a quantity and one of the SKUs that you have in your system. And if you just want to print this to the screen to see how it will look, go ahead and have that check marked. I'll click the test button here, and then I'll bring this over. So we can see that and obviously this is, you're just gonna have to take my word for it, this is about 1 inch high and about 2.5 inches wide, and we can see it's taking the detail of my item, my good old RT14, that's always my test product in these cases, and it's printing the description along the top. Below that, it's printing the retail and our price texts, followed by those price points. It is then printing the barcode itself, starting with the font and then the barcode. If I were to make any of those details changed here, then that would update accordingly. So if I make, for example, the bar width be bigger, let's make that be 0.2, just because, and then we'll go ahead and save that and then do a new test. I'll do this exact same thing and print it to the screen. And of course, now it's saying it's too large to fit on that, probably because I made it way too big, but that's basically the whole idea of that. So let's make that be 0.1, and we'll save that and hit the test. Do the same thing again here. And once again, it's too big. So basically that's, you might have to play around with it a little bit just to kind of get it the way you want it to. I'm just gonna go ahead and zero that back out so it goes back to default. Let's do this. Let's add another detail to the printout. So we can click the add button here to make a selection from this dropdown. Let's say we want to pull in the manufacturer. So we can go to the manufacturer selection. We can then put in any font or font size or font variations. Let's go ahead and put that 1.25 inches from the left. And let's make this be about 0.8 from the top. So then we'll go ahead, we will make sure we print that. Let's go ahead and save that. Save the whole default, then we'll click the test button. Print out our RT14, make sure I don't have any errant characters there. And then what we will see is it will now include the manufacturer down there. And if this barcode were any longer, we can see it just barely might be clipping the top of that. So I would probably want to move that down maybe another either to 0.9 or maybe 8.5 or something like that. Once you kind of then get this all tweaked, you can then start to do a test printout to the label itself to make sure that things like your margins and other things like that are accurate. Now, that's all well and good, but we need to link these barcode defaults to something. And in this case, we're going to link them primarily to your inventory subcategories. Because as I said, you could have multiple barcode defaults, multiple barcode layouts for every given style. Just to make this a little bit easier to see, let's call this the 2312 standard BARD inventory layout, just to kind of give it a unique name. And now what you do is you associate this default with your inventory. If we go, we're actually right here, maintenance and inventory and maintain subcategories. So if you go into maintain subcategories, again, for those who like to use the drop downs, it's maintenance, inventory, and maintain subcategories. Every subcategory has the ability to be associated with a barcode default. So if we click on this first one here, we can see there's the 2312 standard inventory layout. It'll also have the relevant style that it's associated with in parentheses. Let's go ahead and select that. That tells the system anytime I'm printing a label for something that's in the flute category, it'll know to use that default on that style. Now, you don't necessarily have to do this one by one by one. If you're just using one layout for the entirety of your inventory, after you've saved your first one, you can come back and right click on that dropdown and you can say either copy to all subcategories with matching categories. So for example, you'll see that none of these other band instrument categories have a barcode, but if I go back to the first one and right click and select that, so are you sure you want to copy this to all of the band instruments category? I'll say yes. And you'll see the trombone and clarinet and alto sax, they now all have that barcode layout, but none of the other ones will. If you are going to say, yep, let's just use this across the board, you can say copy to selected categories. And that will bring up a window where you can just basically go ahead and check mark whichever ones you want to have use that. If you'd like, you can right click and say tag all to just check mark them all. And when we hit copy, you'll see every single subcategory now has that inventory layout, the default and description. Hopefully that makes sense. Now you can set up other types of barcode layouts. There are options for things like service details and obviously gun book details if you're in our firearms group of customers. And in cases like that, you'll need to set up and associate that default somewhere, and that somewhere is back in your workstation settings. So once again, maintenance, general maintenance, and workstations. And then here in your workstation settings, if we go to the miscellaneous tab and take a look at miscellaneous 3, you can see there are options here for your service barcode default. You can make a selection there. Your receive PO special order label override, you can make a selection there. Your receive purchase order service part order label override, you can make a selection there. And your A&D book description label, you can make a selection there. So all of your selections are available there. They all tie, once again, back to miscellaneous 2 and the relevant style. That printer may be on a completely different computer. You'll just want to make sure that that printer is shared and that you have added that printer to your computer across your network. And as far then as the label printouts themselves, once you've got everything set up there, then when you are either receiving inventory, such as I'll just jump into receive inventory, if this is set to print labels for quantity received or quantity on hand or even quantity specified, if basically this is set to print that, then as you save and receive your quantities, it will just know, okay, it'll look at the subcategory of that item and see what default is associated with it. It'll see where you've got that set up for your style and send the print job accordingly. If we're talking about your service invoices, there will be an option that you can say to print a service label. There will be a little button that you can click so that when you click that, it'll spit out a service label. And that service label you can affix to your service item so that way you can simply scan the barcode on that whenever you're pulling up the service ticket at a workstation, and it'll go straight to that service item. So yeah, basically that's the whole idea with that. If you need to print labels en masse, either afterwards or at any time, back in modules and inventory, there are 2 options of printing barcode labels or printing single labels. If you go to print barcode labels, you've got choices for printing inventory based on inventory received, labels that are singular, existing inventory, batches, contract returns, active E price updates. If you are doing like a sale for a sale parameter, you can print out new labels based on the date and time that sale takes effect. If you've got an Excel spreadsheet of labels that you'd like to print based on SKUs and things like that, you can make a selection there. If you're talking about inventory returns, you can print based on that return date and an invoice reference if you'd like. If you are doing batch consignments, you can make selections based on account and consignment batch number. And if you're doing store-to-store transfers, you can make selections there. If we're looking at the other option, the just print single labels, it's very similar to what we kind of saw on that single tab option for print barcode labels, you'll basically specify, if I can once again bring this over, you can specify the SKU to print, the quantity to print. You can even put in other details like weights if you're doing scale weights and things like that. You can also make a selection of a label override if you'd like to try printing the same label but with a different label layout. So you have all kinds of options with that as well. Hopefully that makes sense. I didn't see any questions coming in during this particular webinar, so hopefully it all made sense. And if not, then I might have put everyone to sleep, as I sometimes do. But that essentially concludes the setup of and the use of your barcode label functions within AIM. Next Tuesday, we're going to look at a very similar function, but with what we call hang tags, which are just basically things that you can print out on normal sheets of paper. It has a very similar function to barcode labels, but we'll explore that next week, Tuesday. I do see some questions coming in. Justin says, is it possible to still have the old Cognitive Blasters work using a generic text-only driver and an LPT port? These were set up in the old V11 setup Barcode Blaster defaults, which I think is gone in version 12. And you are correct, Justin. That is no longer available here in version 12. With version 11 and older, when we started incorporating and using the Zebra printers, we had two options in there for the Advantage label setup, and then we had the other label setup. This is now basically the other label setup. We just call it Setup Blaster labels. What that means for you is if that, for whatever reason, didn't come over in your version 11 conversion when you move to V12, you'll probably need to go in. You can still use something like I believe it's a generic text driver, or potentially an actual cognitive printer driver if those are available out there, and then just set it up essentially the same way. I believe our support techs have had some success with that, so you may want to check in with them if you haven't already done so. But that is basically the case. You'll need to set up those cognitive labels using this type of setup, where you use the style tab to set up the basically the width and height of the labels and the media that it's on, and then the default tab to establish what you want to print on those labels. So hopefully that makes sense. Ellen says, well, it's not a question. She says, all hail Bill and OMG MST3K planter. I knew I liked you for some reason. Well, thank you so much, Ellen. I certainly do appreciate that. And Justin is saying, awesome. Thank you so much, Bill. So once again, I'm more than happy to help out any way that I can. If there are any webinar ideas that you'd like to see me do, right now I've been doing a lot of rehashes of these same webinars that I did when V12 first came out, and trying to just make them as clear and concise as possible. But I'm always making room for new ideas. So if you've got them, definitely shoot them over to me at training@tritechretail.com, or just give us a call here at the Tritech offices. Be more than happy to help out any way we can. Otherwise, we'll look forward to seeing you next week, Tuesday, for covering hang tags. And stay tuned to your email inboxes and tritechretail.com for the upcoming, what month are we in? The upcoming May webinars, which will have a slightly different schedule to them. I believe the first webinar, instead of being on a Tuesday, will be on a Monday. We have reopened our on-site training. So if you didn't see the newsletter that came out, we're now doing on-site training again, and I needed to tweak that first webinar just to kind of fit an available schedule for that. But hopefully it won't be too big of a deal for you all. These obviously all get recorded anyway, so you can even watch them afterwards. But once again, thanks so much, and we will see you next time. Take care, and I hope you have a great day.